The storm hit the city on the same night Daniel made the most desperate decision of his life. Rain hammered violently against the dorm windows as he stared at the eviction notice in his trembling hands, the ink already smudged from earlier tears he pretended were just rainwater. He was a poor scholarship student, juggling 3 part-time jobs, barely eating 2 meals a day, and constantly fighting the fear of dropping out. His mother was gone, his father had abandoned him long ago, and every day felt like a losing battle. But that night, when his professor pulled him aside and mentioned a private, unusual opportunity that could save his academic future, Daniel never imagined it would lead him to standing at an altar, marrying a 71-year-old millionaire woman he had never met before. And he especially never imagined what he would discover 7 days later, something that would shatter every assumption he had made about life, love, and sacrifice. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly keeps stories like this alive. Daniel had agreed to the marriage not out of greed, but out of raw, cornered desperation. The professor explained that Eleanor Kingsley, a wealthy philanthropist with no family left, wanted companionship in her later years. She wasn't looking for romance, and she was honest about that. She simply wanted someone who would treat her with dignity, accompany her to events, help her with her charity work, and not see her as a burden. In exchange, she would pay for Daniel's full education, provide housing, and give him a monthly stipend so he could focus entirely on his studies. It was a contract, not in the cold sense of legality, but in the fragile sense of 2 lonely souls helping each other survive. Daniel accepted because he had no other path forward, and on the day of the wedding, he stood beside Eleanor, unsure where this strange new journey would take him. Eleanor was stunning in a way that had nothing to do with age. Her silver hair framed a gentle face lined with stories. Her eyes carried warmth, wisdom, and something Daniel had not seen in years, genuine kindness. She radiated grace without even trying, and though he had expected awkwardness or distance, she greeted him with a soft smile filled with gratitude, not ownership. That alone softened something in Daniel's chest. She didn't act like a millionaire expecting a favor. She acted like a woman who had lived long enough to know that life's real treasures weren't money or accolades, but human connection. The first days passed quietly, almost too quietly. Eleanor insisted Daniel be comfortable, insisted he call her by her first name, and refused to let him feel indebted. She lived in a beautiful estate on the outskirts of the city, filled with paintings, old photographs, and the soft smell of lavender candles. Daniel had expected something cold and extravagant, but her home felt lived in, almost cozy, like entering a grandmother's warm embrace, if he had ever truly known one. She told him he didn't have to cater to her, didn't have to follow her around. He simply had to live there, study, and slowly get to know her world. But inside Daniel, guilt grew like a shadow. He felt like an imposter. He felt like someone stealing comfort he didn't deserve. At night, he lay awake, wondering whether he had traded away his dignity or whether this marriage would trap him in a life he didn't belong in. His mind churned with worry, yet every morning, Eleanor greeted him with the same warm smile and a soft, "Good morning, Daniel. I hope today is kind to you." She never intruded, never demanded, never questioned him about his past. The gentleness was so foreign it almost frightened him. On the 4th day, Daniel finally began opening up, not through words, but through watching Eleanor live. She volunteered at shelters, wrote checks for charities discreetly, and spent hours reading letters from people she had supported through her foundation. Daniel followed her quietly once, watching from a distance as she served soup to homeless families. She wasn't performing for him. She wasn't doing it for cameras or reputation. She simply moved through the world with an earnest desire to make life a little easier for others. It was then Daniel first felt the ground shift beneath him. This woman he had married wasn't some eccentric millionaire. She was someone who had lost much, given much, and continued giving because she didn't know how to live any other way. Still, something haunted Eleanor. Daniel noticed the way she stared at the old piano in the corner without touching it, the way she avoided one particular wing of the house, the way her smile faltered when late evenings settled in and shadows touched the walls. Her kindness was endless, but behind it lingered a sorrow so deep that Daniel could almost feel its weight. On the seventh day, everything changed. It was a Sunday morning. Sunlight drifted through the windows in golden ribbons, and Eleanor had left early for an appointment she didn't explain. Daniel, still adjusting to this strange new life, wandered through the house, drawn by curiosity and an urge to better understand the woman he had agreed to share his life with, however unconventional that life might be. He moved down the hallway he'd noticed Eleanor always avoided. The floorboards creaked softly, and the air felt heavier there, as though memories lived in the dust motes floating through the sunlight. He found a room at the end of the hall with the door slightly cracked open. Inside, everything was perfectly preserved, untouched by time. A child's drawings were taped to the walls. A little girl with bright pigtails, smiling stick figures, suns with too many rays. A small bed was covered in a quilt that looked handmade, and on top of it sat a stuffed bunny, its fur worn and faded. Daniel stepped closer, his heart beginning to race. On the dresser were framed photographs. Eleanor much younger, holding a little girl who looked impossibly joyful. Another photo of a man who resembled Eleanor in the eyes, perhaps her husband. And then a picture that stopped Daniel cold. Eleanor, eyes swollen with grief, holding a tiny gravestone figurine, a child's favorite toy placed beside it. Daniel felt something collapse inside him. He had stumbled into the ghost Eleanor carried in her heart. Her daughter. Her only child. He saw a thin folder placed carefully on the desk, and though he hesitated, he felt compelled to look. Inside was a newspaper clipping from decades ago. Child lost in tragic accident. Mother in critical condition. Daniel's throat tightened. Eleanor had survived, but her little girl hadn't. Daniel stood in that room for a long time, unable to move, crushed by a pain that didn't belong to him but now lived inside him anyway. And then he heard Eleanor's soft voice behind him. "I should have told you," she whispered. Daniel turned and saw tears glistening in her eyes, trembling but unbroken. She stepped into the room with a reverence that felt almost holy and touched the small bed with fingertips that shook. She explained that her daughter, Lily, died in a car accident when she was 6. Eleanor survived with injuries that healed physically but left a scar no wealth could mend. Her husband died of heart failure 2 years later, consumed by grief. And since then, Eleanor had lived alone, her days filled with charity because helping others was the only way she could keep breathing. When her health started declining recently, nothing immediately life-threatening, but enough to remind her she was aging, she realized she couldn't face the world alone anymore. She didn't want a traditional marriage. She didn't want romance or youth or someone to pity her. She simply wanted a companion, someone with a good heart, someone who needed her as much as she needed them. Daniel felt tears sliding down his cheeks before he even realized he was crying. He told her he didn't marry her for money alone. He didn't marry her out of greed. He married her because for the first time in years, someone saw him not as a burden or a failure, but as a human being worth investing in. And now, standing in that room filled with memories, he felt something deeper: respect, admiration, and a fierce desire to protect the woman who had saved him without asking for anything in return. Eleanor wiped his tears with a trembling hand and confessed something she had kept hidden. She said the real reason she offered this arrangement was because she had seen Daniel volunteering at a shelter weeks before they met. She had been there anonymously, donating under a different name. She saw how he handed out blankets, how he helped an old man walk to the benches, how he stayed behind to sweep the floors even after volunteers were dismissed. She knew he had kindness in him. She knew he had a heart that matched her own. She chose him because he reminded her of the goodness she once hoped her daughter would grow up to carry into the world. Daniel broke down fully then, overwhelmed by a truth he never expected to hear. The marriage no longer felt like a desperate transaction. It felt like fate had woven two broken lives together to help each other heal. From that day forward, Daniel and Eleanor slowly built the life neither of them had expected. He became her closest friend, her partner in charity work, her companion in quiet evenings filled with tea and stories. She encouraged his dreams, pushed him to apply for graduate programs, introduced him to influential mentors who admired his sincerity. And Daniel, in turn, filled her house with laughter again, soft at first, then brighter, then so full that even the ghosts in the old room seemed to warm under its glow. And somewhere along the way, something beautiful grew between them, not romantic love, not youthful passion, but a deeper, soul-level bond built on gratitude, trust, and the healing only two lonely hearts could offer each other. 7 days after the wedding, Daniel wasn't shocked by wealth, luxury, or some hidden fortune. He was shocked by truth. By pain. By compassion. By the understanding that sometimes the people who seem to have everything are the ones who carry the heaviest sorrows. Eleanor didn't just save Daniel's education, she saved his belief in humanity. And Daniel didn't just give Eleanor companionship, he gave her a reason to smile again after decades of grief. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. It helps more people find stories that remind them of hope, healing, and second chances. Before we end, leave a comment below telling us what part of the story moved you the most.